Welcome to this flight of the Retail Pilot. I'm your host, Ken Pilot, former CEO and current brand advisor, retail tech investor, and board member. I'm thrilled to share with you the insights from some of retail's leaders and legends, as well as my perspective on retail today. This podcast is sponsored by the following. Bluecore's software solution turns anonymous online shoppers into known customers and repeat customers. Bluecore enables retailers to personalize and optimize their email, SMS, and site marketing campaigns by delivering targeted and relevant messages based on where every customer is in their journey. Bluecore replaces annoying high-volume messaging with high-value messaging. Customers include Alo Yoga, Neiman Marcus, and Gap. Welcome back to the Retail Pilot. And here's this week's KPOV. It's all about the shopping season. We're counting down to Christmas, and we've got some venture capital firms, private equity groups, and other players out there that have a big Christmas list, but are buying things at big discounts. Let's start with Coupang, the largest e-commerce player in South Korea, who will be buying Farfetch for $500 million. A bit of a markdown from the $25 billion valuation that it had a few years ago. Farfetch is a marketplace for luxury product, and this is definitely the lifeline that they needed. In the similar space, out of the UK, it looks like Matches Fashion, now known as Matches, will be bought by House of Fraser for a purported $50 million. Also a markdown from $750 million that Apex paid only a few years ago. Well, actually 2017. And then the biggest deal of the year may be going to either Brigade Capital and Arc House Management, who's hoping to buy Macy's for purported $5.8 billion, or it will be going to Sycamore Partners, who sees more than just the value of the real estate, but also the synergy of the assets they have along with the assets that Macy's has. That's the shopping list. I don't know what will end up in what stocking, but speaking of stocking, let's switch over to socks. Yeah, we're going to talk about socks today. Actually, you'll hear about it on a previously recorded podcast with my good friend, Dave Heath, Bombas co-founder and CEO. I'm here today on this flight of the Retail Pilot with David Heath, the co-founder and chief executive officer of Bombas. Prior to the launch in 2013, David dedicated 2 years to rigorous product testing and refinement to create the best performing and most comfortable sock available, while focusing on helping those in need. Previously, he led business development at Urban Daddy, followed by new media acquisitions and strategy at Ukaipa Companies. As a true serial entrepreneur, David has founded 3 companies with 1 successful exit and has invested in and consulted on a range of startup businesses from concept through launch and continued growth. David has been featured on ABC Shark Tank, NBC Today Show, CBS Morning, ABC Good Morning America, Bloomberg TV, and the New York Times, and was named EY Entrepreneur of the Year in 2017. Welcoming my good friend, Dave Heath, CEO of Bombas, to today's flight of the Retail Pilot. Dave, it's great to see you.
Good to see you, Ken.
It's been a while.
It has been.
I'm still a strong wearer and believer of Bombas socks. I did have a concept. I got to bounce this off you first. The concept is this. What if we had a Bombas sock party and everybody brought their single pair of Bombas socks to that party? I think we could make lots of pairs at that party. I mean, who doesn't have single pair of Bombas socks floating around?
If you want to partner with Hinge or, one of those dating companies, and we'd always said it would be fun to sponsor sock hops. I just don't think people do those anymore. It's not the 1950s. So
there you go.
I don't know.
Anyway, listen, it's great to have you here. We spoke a number of years ago. I think I love to recall investments that I missed. Yeah. Certainly, I got beaten up by Ryan Babenzian on a recent investment that I missed, but I think you're one of the first investments that I missed. We spoke about it, we talked about it, and I missed it. But congratulations, you've had so much success, and it's great to still be connected after having a big whiff at the plate. Talk to us a little bit about your journey. You started in an area that was not in the fashion space. You were very much focused on digital media and technology. How did you transition from that into socks?
Yeah, I actually think, I'll rewind the tape a little bit more from there. I grew up in a house where my dad was an entrepreneur. So I watched him build a business in the basement of our house, took over our garage, and then watched him over 30 years build a multi-million-dollar business. And I think whether it was part genetics or part, osmosis being around that, I always had a desire to want to work for myself. So I went to school for entrepreneurship at Babson. And regardless of kind of wherever I worked post college, it was always with the intent of trying to learn skills or learn about an industry that I may want to start a business in, down the road. And so, when I graduated college, I went and worked in software sales, thinking that technology was quote unquote the future. And maybe this was something I wanted to do. I did really well. I made a bunch of money, but I hated it. I was selling B2B software infrastructure. It was like speaking another language. I just didn't really resonate with the product. It didn't resonate with the customers. And so I was like, I want to go find something that I'm much more passionate about. And so I joined a company called Urban Daddy, which was an online media company focused on, cities and like nightlife and fashion and, all the kind of cool hotspots. And, being in your mid 20s in New York City, working for a lifestyle publication like that certainly opened a lot of doors for a lot of fun times. But I was also intrigued by the fact that, the company was 6 people when I joined. And felt like I was in kind of the ground level and got to really understand how the inner workings of a startup worked. So for me, it was less, about the industry. It was more about for the size of the company. I worked there for 5 years, grew the company to 150 people, and I got to watch, all the good things that we did and all the mistakes that we made, always kind of keeping in the back of my mind that eventually I wanted to do my own thing. So I was kind of, using this as a real life master's program of sorts, really trying to absorb as much information as possible. And it was while I was at Urban Daddy, I'd always kind of kicked around ideas in the back of my head. I think from the time I graduated till the time I started Bombas, I had written 40 something business plans. I'd started 3 smaller companies, local businesses type of thing. And always looking for that kind of big idea. And I was less concerned or interested about, it has to be in a specific industry. I was just more interested in solving problems. And I think that's what is at the heart of every, entrepreneur is you find a problem in the world and you wonder to yourself, can I solve this through business? Can I make a better mousetrap? Can I have a better experience? And for me, that problem was I learned that socks were the number one most requested clothing item at homeless shelters. And I thought to myself, it's pretty sad. Here's an item of clothing that, I've never spent more than a few seconds a day thinking about. And yet it's perceived as a luxury item for someone who is experiencing homelessness. And as I dug in deeper, it was, over 600,000 people in the US experience homelessness every year. And I live in one of the wealthiest cities, in the world. And yet on my way to and from work, I interact with people in the homeless community on almost a daily basis. And so I was kind of motivated to, solve this problem. And naturally I said, is there a way I can solve this with business? And from being naturally interested in entrepreneurship, I was obviously following, this was 2011. So I saw what Tom Shoes was doing. They were growing like crazy, pioneered this buy one, give one, business model. Warby Parker had just launched and they were adopting that to eyewear. And I thought, hey, maybe I could start a company, that donates a pair of socks for every pair of socks sold. So that's ultimately how I got from working in media to working in apparel.
So you really came at the business through a social need versus I have an idea with a social output.
Correct.
Very cool. And I know we talked about this a bit earlier, but to date, you've donated over 100 million pair of socks, which is amazing.
Well, 100 million items, because now we sell underwear and t-shirts. So it's a combination of socks, underwear, and t-shirts, which are the top 3 most requested clothing items at homeless shelters. Underwear is number 2, t-shirts are number 3.
Your co-founder, Randy Goldberg, you guys, how did you meet and how long have you been together?
So Randy was the sixth employee at Urban Daddy, and I was the seventh. So we met literally because our chairs touched the back of each other because the office was so small. And it didn't start well. I was in sales there, and I have a very loud voice, and I sometimes get over exuberant. And he was a copywriter, and so he's sitting there trying to focus. And this is before the days of like AirPods and noise canceling headphones, and so he's trying to work away writing these pieces, and I'm babbling away, talking to clients, bumping into the back of his chair. But over some quick period of time, we became kind of fast friends. And we similarly, while we were there, I think had a very similar outlook that we both wanted to start something. And I think as our friendship developed, we thought about, hey, why don't we think about doing something together?
Was there a moment when you were concepting, creating your business plan, where you had to decide who was going to be the CEO and who was not going to be the CEO? What happened?
No, and we have two other co-founders as well. This guy, Aaron Wolk, who was kind of the, design. He's still with the company. He was kind of the design lead from the creative side. And then my brother, Andrew Heath, who was really kind of the ops and finance, came out of investment banking. I think as the four of us got together, I think one of the things that has cemented such a good partnership from the beginning, and it still operates this way, is that we are very self-aware of our skills, but also of our weaknesses. And so when the four of us came together, we overlapped in all the best ways, right? We cared about the same things from an ethical standpoint. We had shared similar values. We had ideas of wanting to build the company a certain way that we all shared. But, I was the consummate salesman. Randy was a great brand strategist. Aaron was really good at design, and my brother was really good at operations and finance. And all of us have a bit of a business background, so we share the same language. I can look at a P&L, and Aaron can understand marketing, and so we all kind of understand the same world as each other, but also know that each of us has a very specific superpower. So it just worked really, really, really well from day one.
The name Bombas, what's the origin? Who thought of it? The branding, it's pretty brilliant and cool. Who gets the credit for that?
Yeah, Aaron really gets the credit for that. Aaron worked at creative agencies, pretty much his whole life. And so did Randy, but Randy was more on the brand strategy side. And, we'd always kicked around, names and ideas and logos and concepts. And I think Aaron ultimately was like, I get what we want to do. Give me a weekend. Let me go away. I'm going to draft up a bunch of stuff. I'm going to put together kind of a pitch deck, as it will, with a bunch of different options, and, we'll see what feels right. He came back and really pitched us two ideas. He was like, either we can pick ants or we can pick bees, because these are the two animals outside of humans that are naturally altruistic. They work together in communities. They help each other, that there's no ego involved. And we ultimately felt like bees, I think, were a little bit more fun and playful than ants. And so Aaron had presented us with this name, Bombas. And I said, well, what's that? And he said, well, it's derived from the Latin word for bumblebee, which is Bombus. We changed the U to an A, felt it like it was a little bit more unique and could own it. All the classic signs, 2 syllables, some alliteration in there, easy to remember, easy to say. And, and we just kind of fell in love with it. And, that's really the origin story.
Great logo. The brand now is so recognizable. Both Paige and I, we own lots of pairs of Bombas. And yes, we're trying to bring our socks together the next time we're together, pair them up. It's funny because at one point I thought maybe this was a Red Antler product. Red Antler was so instrumental in working with naming and branding so many startups, certainly Warby Parker being one of them, you mentioned earlier. But it's interesting that you guys came up with this on your own. So 2 years in, business is in the making, 2014, kind of maybe the watershed moment for Bombas. You appear on Shark Tank. And, I think we've all watched Shark Tank. There are some assholes and there's some great people. I'm not going to say Mr. Wonderful is the former, but I do believe he called you guys cockroaches on the show. The
It was
cockroaches,
sock cockroaches.
sock
Yeah.
cockroaches. But be that as it may, if Google serves me correctly, it was your deal was the most profitable deal of any Shark Tank brand or company to appear on the show ever.
Yeah. So we hold the title of biggest Shark Tank company by revenue. I don't know by profitable because that stuff doesn't get disclosed that broadly, but we are the number one company in terms of revenue for sure, and by a pretty large margin.
And Damon John is still an advisor today and a fairly significant shareholder in the company. He took the leap and he invested and is now still part of your future.
Yes. Yeah. So Damon's been a great mentor and advisor to us along the way. Our relationship is, I think, somewhat different than what I think a lot of people would expect from the show, which is, I think you get, and what I actually really love about the show is that you get people from all walks of life, all areas of experience, and I actually really love the people who come up with great ideas, but, don't know how to pick up a phone and call Disney, for instance, to get a licensing agreement, or how to get their first sales or build a website. For us, the real value of Damon came in someone who bootstrapped a business from zero, and ultimately built a multi-billion-dollar brand. So for us, it was less about, hey, can you help us get into Walmart? Or, hey, can you, open up this door for us? Because our business was so focused on online, right? Direct to consumer. And his business was largely, a wholesale business. And in a lot of interviews you'll hear from Damon, he'll say, like, I ended up learning more from the Bombas guys than they probably learned from me, which of course we don't agree with. But, that's, I think, the kind of highlights the type of partnership that we have, which is, it's a very mutually beneficial partnership. We've leveraged him obviously tremendously for awareness. In the early days, he would always talk about us. He'd hype us up every opportunity he could when he was on television, and he would invite us into some of those things, speaking opportunities, get us on the Today Show, Good Morning America, everything that he was promoting himself on. He always made a point to include Bombas. And, and then he was there whenever we needed to make hard decisions around, hey, are we ready to go into wholesale? Are we ready to launch a new product? And would provide us advice as to, hey, you've captured lightning in a bottle in the online direct to consumer socks. Like, you've got a long, we were growing 300% year over year in our first few years. He's like, you've got so much runway, run with that. Don't focus on new products. Don't focus on new channels just yet. And we took a lot of that advice to heart. I mean, we didn't launch wholesale or a new product until we were a $100 million business in our fifth year of business.
Really had you focus your efforts, stay within a fairly narrow range until you hit a volume level that enabled you to begin developing more channels of distribution and more lines of product.
Yeah. And even today, we're over $330 million, and we've only added underwear and t-shirts, to our product line. It's not like, we're not trying to be sweatpants and sweatshirts and sleepwear and loungewear and athletic wear. We've certainly been tempted, I think, as any growth entrepreneur is, right? Where can we get more growth? What can we do? Where can we create more product? But I found that, sometimes the more difficult part about being an entrepreneur is knowing what to say no to rather than what to say yes to.
At what point did you realize that Bombas was no longer a startup?
That's a good question. I mean, in a lot of ways, I still feel like it is. We've got 160 employees, and I'd say that I could probably, I probably know the first name of about 95% of them. We still feel scrappy. But for me, I think, for personally, probably the most, the point where I was like, wow, and I still have these wow moments, but, I'll go, to a Barry's boot camp class or a Soul Cycle class, and, I'll see like 10 out of the 30 people in the class wearing Bombas, or I'll be traveling in the airport and see people take their shoes off.
Do you confront the other 20 people and say, what's up with that?
No. I still always go up to people that I see, and, I thank them for being a supporter. And, I'd say most of the time, if I have the time, if I'm not running somewhere very quickly or they're running somewhere quickly, I always take their number and I send them a gift card as a thank you.
Let's take a quick break with a word from our sponsors. Predict Spring is a global point-of-sale platform live in 22 countries. The platform includes mobile POS, endless aisle, fulfillment, inventory management, and clienteling, creating a true omni experience for customers and associates. Predict Spring powers Suit Supply, Converse, Lovesac, Decium, Janie and Jack, and Bouclair. Breakfast helps brands like HelloFresh, Perfume.com, and QVC increase revenue across Meta and TikTok by creating hundreds of user-generated content video ads. The Breakfast Creator Network, with over 5,000 strong, produces original content that is authentic to each platform and built to drive performance, all done in as little as 3 weeks. Check out breakfast.io. That's BRKFST.io. And with that, we're back. What advice would you give to entrepreneurs today? Things that were successful for you as you were scaling this business and obstacles that you ran into, or challenges that you faced, or just mistakes that you made along the way. How would you help?
Yeah. We touched a little bit on it before. I think one of my universal pieces of advice is definitely focus, especially in the earlier days, right? You've got so much blue ocean in front of you that you can sometimes get distracted by chasing every opportunity. Oh, that person could be a client, or we could sell this type of product, or we could sell on that channel or in this store, or, it's so tempting, oftentimes, especially if you're getting inbound interest. So I'd say as one big wrapper, focus is one of those things where I would definitely advise people always keep that in the back of their mind, right? And be saying, can I be really great at one thing rather than mediocre at a bunch of things? And that's something that I hear often in terms of people I speak with, that are just getting started or even a few years into their business. That temptation of doing more is always there, but it's not, as I said before, it's sometimes the things that you don't do versus the things that you do that end up, leading you to the greatest success. I think my next piece of advice, is use time to your advantage, right? I think one of the biggest, tragedies that have come out of the, 10 plus year bull market run that we had is the companies that were celebrated in that period of time were the companies that were growing the fastest, raised the most amount of money at the highest valuation in the shortest amount of time. Business is not, successful businesses are not defined by how quickly you can grow, but how long you can sustain, right? We all remember, Nike, Maytag, GE, like all of the great Coca-Cola, right? These are brands that have really withstood the test of time. There are a handful of companies. I mean, you've been in the tech business and the retail business for long enough to know there are a lot of boom and bust in that graveyard. Brands that went to $1 billion in valuation that don't even exist anymore. And so that was something early on that me and my co-founders really aligned with, which is we said we want to be more like a Nike or a Patagonia or a Lululemon, brands that, took 20 plus 30 years to develop a really large company rather than trying to be the biggest and the fastest and as quickly as possible. And so for us, we were never influenced by brands that might be in our space or might be in adjacent spaces to us, or even in the broader direct to consumer landscape that were, raised $30 million, raised $100 million, has a $3 billion, all these crazy numbers and valuations. And on the front cover of magazines, the most innovative founder, look at how quickly they grew this company. We collectively, on a $330 million plus business, we did two relatively, by comparison to people in our industry, small rounds. And, we raised $1 million after we'd already generated $1 million of revenue, and it was mostly to fund inventory because we kept selling out. And then in year 3, we raised another $3 million again to fund inventory because we kept selling out. But we were profitable from day one. And that was the last outside capital that came into the business in terms of primary capital. So we built our entire business on $4 million of capital raised, which again, if you look at a lot of the direct to consumer companies, they've raised 30, 100, 200. Some of them have raised 3, 4, $500 million and aren't any bigger than we are. And so again, I think my best piece of advice is think about growing for the long term, and doing things methodically, take your time, use time to your advantage. Because what people don't tell you is that if you grow too fast, you end up actually encountering a whole slew of challenges and mistakes as you can't possibly ingest or keep up with the growth, and then it translates to product quality or a poor customer experience. And those are the things, product quality, poor customer experience. Those are the things that are synonymous with brands that really last, that endure the test of time.
One thing that you mentioned I find interesting is that having only done 2 rounds relative to other companies I know who do multiple rounds, just the amount of time that it saved you by not having to go out and do rounds. Because I think rounds, they're draining, they take your eye off the ball, and they stop you from really running your business well.
Yeah. And we never in the history of our business do we use a term called how much runway do we have, right? Which is like, that's why I think most founders are stressed out, because they have this, who raise a lot of capital. All they're doing is to just keep moving the goalpost further and further and further away, and they're kind of chasing this inevitable outcome that they have to, at one point, figure out how to become profitable. And too much money, I think, can create bad habits for founders early on. And I think we're dealing with a little bit of that reckoning right now where, capital is not free anymore. And so, the companies that were burning a lot of capital are still burning a lot of capital. You're seeing it reflected in their business performance, their valuations. It's, I never wanted the stress of saying, how am I going to pay my employees hanging over my head, even if it was 12 months out.
Right. Great way to view the business, very responsible way to view the business, and certainly a methodology that many should be applying today, because raising a lot of money early doesn't mean you get to spend it all early. And I've seen that happen, and it doesn't turn out well. Shifting gears a little bit, let's talk about the breakdown of the business overall. You were very focused on D2C to launch. That was your primary focus. You mentioned up to 100 million. That was your lane. Where are you today? What other channels are you going into, from wholesale to international, potentially stores, which I have a hard time understanding that, though it could be a very small and efficient store. But talk to me really about the makeup of your business today.
Yeah. So we're still 94% direct to consumer. I think some of the benefits of our category, socks, underwear, t-shirts, not as highly competitive as, say, footwear, and lower cost items, sizing is a lot easier. And then, of course, we've got, our mission component. So I think there are lower barriers to entry for customers to say, I'm going to take a flyer and try these socks or try these underwear, than say commit to, a new running shoe or, a sweater or a jacket or a suit or something that maybe is a little bit more fitted. So we've always benefited from that. I think we also benefited from, I think luck, timing, I don't know what you want to call it, but like we grew up in the age where, the marketing ecosystem was starting to mature, but was still nascent enough that CPAs and cost per acquisition and CPMs and stuff were cheap. So we got to do all of our learning and testing very early on with very little budget, because, early days, you could acquire a customer on Facebook for $3, which sounds insane, today. But we built that muscle and that internal, core competency internally from a very young age. And so by the time that things like, IDFA and, iOS updates and things like that came and started really affecting a lot of people, we had such a sophisticated view of the landscape, and we'd really developed internal tooling, around attribution and data, allocation, that we were able to navigate those times far better and kind of reallocate into different channels and still be able to have some visibility as to who our customers are, who we're targeting, and do it in a much more efficient way, which is why we haven't felt the need to expand outside of our core competency as much. We did launch wholesale 5 years ago when we were a $100 million business. I think mostly at that time it was mostly driven by learning, right? What does our business look like at wholesale? Knowing that, all right, we're 100 million today. I think we now see long-term aspirations or line of sight to being potentially $1 billion plus brand. And knowing that we probably would have a hard time getting to $1 billion without some sort of a distributed distribution, from a channel perspective. So we said, let's start wholesale. Let's go with really good brand appropriate places, Nordstrom's, Dick's Sporting Goods, places where we felt like the Bombas brand would show up in a good way, or similar type of customer. And, because we were growing, this goes back to my point about focus, because we were still growing, 50, 30, 40, 50% year over year at real scale, we never felt the pressure to put the pedal on the gas and divert resources from the core business to our wholesale business. So we kind of did it enough to learn and get by, but not enough where we were really kind of investing in it. Where we're at today, we, 300 plus million, as I mentioned, we're starting to say, okay, now feels like the time. We've been in wholesale for 5 years. Every single door that we are in across all of our accounts, we are the number one selling sock brand in every single store that we're in. So we know that we sell really well. We know that, what type of customers like us. And now, we've got $100+ million marketing budget that is mostly dedicated to the direct to consumer business. But, we run TV ads, we run radio ads, we run, out of home campaigns. We're starting to see that we're benefiting from some of that marketing in store because, you're on Sirius satellite radio, you're on TV, and someone who walks into a Nordstrom's, oh, right, I just saw them and they were on Shark Tank. And then I saw that Facebook ad. Cool, they're right here. I'm going to purchase the product. So we're trying to be a little bit more where the customer is at. And look, we still know that 85% of all, sock underwear and t-shirt sales happen in store. So it behooves us to be where the customer still is, even though we still see a lot of opportunity to grow our online business.
If you've given thought to vending machines, I would think your product would lend itself so beautifully to those vending machines that are so cool. You see them at the airport.
We have. Yeah, we have. Again, I think it, from that area of focus and time and energy, I think it's easier for us to think about opening up, a Nordstrom's that has, 800 stores that we could distribute in, relatively quickly with proven material volume than understanding, how are we going to operate vending machine? How are we going to fulfill them? How are we going to, and really like, what could we sell in a vending machine per day? A couple thousand pair, a couple $1,000s. It just, I think at this size, it doesn't move the needle for us that much. It's something we've looked at though.
Because I was going to offer to take that on for you. I'd love to be the store manager. Oh. I figured you wouldn't open up a store, but maybe I'd have a few vending machines or I could get an area of the country. But I've seen
stores are not on our stores are something that's not really on our time horizon.
Yeah.
I think as you said, you're kind of like, maybe it would be weird. Socks and underwear and t-shirts are more of an add-on purchase than they are a destination purchase. I don't think a lot of people wake up on Saturday and say, I can't wait to go shop for underwear today. But if you're at a shoe store and you see our product, you might add them.
You mentioned new categories. You're out of just the sock business. You have underwear, tees, slippers also, I believe.
Yeah. So slippers we see as kind of a sock adjacent. They're mostly soft bottomed, things. We've done one hard bottom slipper. It's called our Sunday slipper. Performs incredibly well. I think we get credit because we're good at soft, cozy things on your feet. And so our slipper business has done very, very well for us, but we are very conscious of not using what we internally refer to as the F word, footwear. Footwear, sure, being an apparel guy for so many, it's a tough business. Sizing is brutal, low margin. So we like to say slippers is kind of more sock adjacent than traditional footwear.
From a marketing point of view, you guys, I know you started out being like a CAC zero company. You weren't spending any money to acquire new customers. Now it sounds like you're doing some creative things. What's working best today outside of word of mouth to really help grow Bombas?
Yeah, I get this question a lot. And, for a company of our size and scale, I wish I could tell people that, like, oh, it's TikTok, go on TikTok. I can't, there is not one channel, right? When you're at our size and you're spending 100+ million a year, where we get, efficiency is by leveraging all the channels together, right? And using that multi-touch attribution model of saying, okay, someone sees us on TV, then we serve them a Facebook ad, and then they happen to be searching for socks on Google, and we're the first thing. Those are 3 touch points that all interplay with each other. So I can't isolate one out and say, oh, this is the channel that's much more efficient. Some channels are incredibly inefficient if you just look at them from a CPA perspective. But then when you actually survey the customers and see how much they were influenced by a TV ad, and ultimately, yeah, maybe they clicked on a Facebook ad or an Instagram ad or a YouTube ad or whatever. Traditional single point attribution, you'd say, oh no, Facebook gets the credit for that. But at our size and scale, we're touching customers in so many different places and on so many times that we need to kind of think of it as a total ecosystem rather than just say, oh, here's the one channel. This is what's working really well. Then you layer audiences on top of it, and what works. Some channels work better for an older audience. Some channels work better for a younger audience. The younger audience maybe doesn't spend as much up front, but they're more loyal. They buy more frequently. So you've got to really, it's very sophisticated in terms of dissecting, your audiences and, where the value is in each of those and then how they all play together.
You've mentioned TV a few times. Working with connected TV, is that something that you're seeing as a growing category for you of marketing in terms of your spend?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, we started TV, and I say TV more broadly. TV is can include over the top, right? Which is streaming services, Hulu, YouTube, any of those. And then traditional kind of over the air television. Again, it's a little bit of a scale thing. It's very expensive, which is why small companies can't really afford the budgets to produce TV spots, then test them, and then put the media behind them in order to see, whether they're working or not. But, TV, over the years, it probably represents 20% of our spend now.
Sizable.
It's almost as big as Facebook.
Interesting. Collaborations have also been kind of an important part of your marketing juice, if you will. What are some of the collaborations you've done or are most proud of, and what collaborations do you still want to do?
Yeah, a great question. I'll preface this by saying, when we started Bombas, there were some other brands, in our category in socks specifically, but, obviously in apparel more broadly, that their brand solely relied on partnerships and collabs, right? And drops and stuff like that. We felt from very early on, and it was where we all kind of agreed from a brand perspective, that we wanted Bombas to always be able to stand on its own as a singular brand before, getting, oh, right, that's the brand that collaborated with the NBA. That's the brand that collaborated with Rihanna. That's the brand that, picked whatever celebrity or brand or whatever. And I think the temptation early on is, oh, if I could just get exposure, but then you're known for just that thing, especially if it takes off. And then people don't really know what you really stand for. They just think, oh, you did a collaboration with Supreme. I like Supreme, so I'm going to buy it. But they're not buying it because it's Bombas. They're buying it because it's Supreme. So we chose partnerships.
So, wait. So Supreme calls you tomorrow and says, we want to do a collab. You're turning that down, right?
I think we're at a size now where we have enough brand awareness where we could hold our own against Supreme. I think that's pretty cool.
Cool.
But we didn't chase after those things early on. We certainly talked about it, Kith and Supreme and some of these really cool, street brands, but we thought we'd get kind of lost. And so, coming back to where our values and what we defined the brand as, from the beginning, which was this mission-based brand, choosing partners for us has always been something that we look at through the mission lens. And so, one of our biggest and probably, you asked me what the partnership I was probably most proud of, was Sesame Street. Now, a lot of people don't know, everybody knows Sesame Street, but a lot of people don't know that Sesame Street was originally created as a way to help provide education to the broad masses, especially those in lower income areas that may not have access to regular schooling or good schooling. So inherently, their mission early on was to help, the underserved or the less fortunate. And, a big part of our mission is to give back to those types of communities. And so for us to, come together, it felt so natural and authentic because we both shared a vision or a mission of wanting to serve very similar types of communities. When we partnered with Disney princesses, we did it through the lens of, female empowerment and, partnered with organizations that specifically donated product to, domestic violence, survivors or people experiencing domestic violence. We've done a number of partnerships in the LGBTQ community because, what people don't realize is 40% of LGBTQ plus IA youth experience homelessness, and it's a crazy stat. But so we always try to think through how can we use a partnership to then shed light back on our mission rather than, oh, that's a cool brand. Let's just do it for brand awareness.
More of a strategy and the thought that goes into who you're going to partner with and collaborate with. Pivoting a little bit, are you endorsing or thinking about endorsing any pro athletes? Where are we going to see your socks on TV on an athlete? I would love to see at the U.S. Open or join
so
the
would
US
I.
Open if you're going. I'm available.
I was there last night. It was incredibly hot, but really cool, to see Ben, Shelton, pull out a win against, big foe.
Yeah.
We've always, athletes has been one of those things that I think, we have a performance line of our products, right? We have, athletic socks, golf, tennis, cycling, running. It is incredibly competitive from a sponsorship perspective. It's really hard to compete with the Nikes, Adidas's, now the On Runnings of the world.
Yeah.
So where we actually end up partnering with a lot of athletes is on the philanthropic side. Again, it goes back to our mission. So a lot of them have very strict endorsement, policies where they can't wear their product, on court or, in play. But we partner with their organizations and we give a lot of them because they come from underserved or under, privileged communities. So a lot of them give back to those communities and we help assist in doing that. So you'll see a lot of times, we'll get athletes that will endorse us on their Instagram and stuff through giving events. That's kind of our backdoor way of being able to work with them without, doing full sponsorship.
Who would be your number one or number 1 and 2 competitor out there in the space? Who are you kind of looking over your shoulder at?
Yeah, I don't say this, arrogantly. I don't really think there's a lot of people, a lot of companies squarely in our space. I think you've got, a lot of brands who, maybe very specifically market towards the running community or, more of the fashion community, some of those collaborations and stuff that I talked about before, but when I think about like who are we ultimately like trying to take market share from? And frankly, when I look at the data, who are we really taking market share away from? It's really kind of the large, commodity incumbents. It's the Haines's, Fruit of the Looms, Gildan's of the world. We are not trying to compete against Smartwool or Belega or Nike or any of these kind of highly specialized, companies, which frankly, outside of Nike, those businesses are just much smaller than us because it's a niche category and they're really good at what they do. I respect those brands tremendously. But where we always designed Bombas from day one to be a mass market brand, but a premium mass market brand. And we kind of talk about it internally as, the Starbucks effect, right? Is how can we, if 25, 30 years ago, people were drinking Maxwell House or, getting a cup of coffee from their corner, deli or a gas station, now you put a Starbucks in every coffee and you charge people, 6 times more for a cup of coffee. And it becomes this daily ritual and routine. we think similarly, how can we get people from a dollar, sub-dollar pair of socks, at Hanes Fruit stuff like that, to, a pair of socks that might cost 10, 11, $12, but it's a product you put on first thing in the morning, you take off last thing at night. You can really feel the benefits of the features and the comfort. And you don't need to be an extreme athlete to really benefit from a lot of the technology and innovation that we put into our product, which is why I think we have scaled much bigger than a lot of the other people in our space who really focused on, maybe just one, very niche category. So, I don't really kind of look around and see a lot of direct competition. Sure, there's people that have kind of copied our no-show product or, make compression socks or running socks, but we try to position ourselves as this one brand where you can get, every product that you need. And now we're trying to do the same thing in underwear and t-shirts, where it's the best three things that you wear closest to your body, you put on first thing in the morning and take off last thing at night. The things where comfort truly matters the most, because it's the thing that is closest to your skin. And that's what we focus on.
The competitors in the category for me are my son, because he's competing for my Bombas socks. I actually do audits in the house when he goes out to school. I'll check the door because I told the person that works here, if you're doing the sock, all the Bombas socks go to me.
Yeah.
So I have to.
I hear this all the time.
Socks. It's really not a good thing. It's not a good thing. That's why we have single socks.
You need to buy them more.
I should. I buy them by literally. I don't know where they go. There is some truth to socks disappearing in the dryer. I think we've all experienced that.
I think the dryer gets a bad rap. I think the washing machine is in on it.
You think so? I think they're colluding. Yeah. Quick question on technology before we wrap up. What's exciting you in the tech space today? There's so much happening, from AI to algorithms that help you figure out where to market, ESP providers. What's exciting to Bombas?
Yeah, obviously, AI is exciting. I think I don't even know. It's hard to say we're even in the first inning. I think we're still in the parking lot, grilling hot dogs and hamburgers before the game. I think there's a tremendous amount of promise there in terms of, automating, asset creation to, doing site updates for copy and, using AI to do site merchandising and some of these kind of really remedial type of tasks that a machine you can teach to do. The stuff that we've seen is not quite there yet in terms of the quality, and follow the Levi's thing where they used AI generated models to increase diversity and totally got slammed for it. So we're not trying to be like the bleeding edge adopter, of any of this stuff. We're trying to, like we operate, always do our diligence, see what works before we, adopt anything. But obviously see a lot of promise in that. There's a really cool product, that we're planning to launch in the beginning of next year called Constructor, which is a site merchandising tool that I think has some AI component built into it where we'll learn the behaviors
search engine.
of like what's selling really well and reoptimize your, reposition your category pages to move stuff that either has low inventory down to the other side and, see what people are clicking on, auto optimize that. I think that's really cool. We're using some AI stuff, like new AI, but there's a company called Thankful. They just got purchased by, I think Customer or they got purchased by Gladly. And that was handling, 25% of our customer service interactions.
It's a big area.
Where's my order? If someone type, hey, where's my order? And all of a sudden it can pull the tracking information and respond to them within like half of a second versus having someone else pull that information. So those things are cool, but, we're not I never got wrapped up in trying to convince people that Bombas was a tech company. We're an apparel company that uses technology. We're not a technology company that sells apparel,
So get your priorities straight.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. You ready for rapid fire, Dave?
Let's do it.
All right. If you weren't running Bombas, which company would you want to run?
I don't know if I would run another company. I've always really wanted to run a kitchen. That was my other dream in life, was to, become like a master chef.
Pro athlete or a rock star?
Definitely rock star. I love music.
Favorite musician?
No, it's like choosing your favorite child. I can't do it.
All right, we'll pass on that one. Who would you most like to meet?
I'm definitely in the camp of like a Larry David or Seinfeld. I just like think that would crack up,
Where are you going with
either of
that?
them.
What are you
Yeah.
talking about? Okay.
Yeah.
I like those guys. They're fun. What is your superpower and what is your kryptonite?
I think my superpower is, and I'll say this more broadly, is that I'm really good at understanding the customer. And as a CEO, I look at everybody that I quote unquote serve as my customers, whether it's my employees, my investors, my actual paying customers, in our case, our non-paying customers in the homeless community. I think I have a very high EQ and I look at everything through the customer experience lens. And I try to always put myself in the customer's shoes. So that I'd say is definitely my superpower. My kryptonite is, I was born with ADHD. I'm very easily distracted. So I need to like methodically live by my calendar or else like I don't get anything done.
Favorite streamed show?
Hard to say of all time, but I'd say more recently Blackbird, which was on Apple TV, came out, I think, about 2 years ago. I was late to the game on it, but I could not put it down. I thought it was so good.
Not too dark.
I mean, it's definitely dark. And my other one I would say is Ozark, but that's over. But I loved Ozark.
So that means you definitely like Breaking Bad too.
Oh, for sure. Top
I'm
three
like the
great
AI
shows of
model.
all time.
I'm like, the AI model for stream shows. If you like this, you like that. I'm programming it.
Yeah. Great.
That's cool. And one last thing that David's going to leave us with is a promo code just to make sure everyone out there listening can get into Bombas or get more Bombas so they have enough to withstand any attacks from family members, which I'm frequently dealing with. So that'll be Pilot 20. That'll be good for 1 week from the time we drop this podcast.
And that'll be 20% off any order.
There you go. You've heard it here. With that, we're going to land this flight of the Retail Pilot. David Heath, so great to have you on board.
Thanks, Ken.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's flight of the Retail Pilot. And please give us a review on your favorite podcast platform.